So, with that over, I'd very much like to introduce our first speaker, Professor Josh Bongard from the University of Vermont, who I'm sure needs no introduction from many of you, who's been working on evolutionary error algorithms, the very exciting xenobots work, and I'm sure will give us a really fantastic introduction to this workshop. So welcome, Josh, and I'll hand over to you for your talk.
Thank you very much, Josie. And Ohio gozaimasu to everyone there in Japan. Good morning and good evening from East Coast United States. As Josie mentioned, I'm Josh Bongard, and I'm going to tell you a little bit today about not just soft robots, but rigid robots that came before them. And I think one future direction for soft robotics is biological robots, or the xenobots. Can everybody see my slides okay? Yes, okay, great. So as Josie mentioned, I've been working in this space for a long time, 20 years now. I started as a graduate student working in this space of evolutionary robotics, which back then and still today is a subfield within robotics where the attempt is to optimize or co-optimize or co-improve not just the control policy of the robot, but the physical structure of the robot simultaneously. I've worked on this for a number of years. We started out with rigid robots. I worked with Todd Lipson at Cornell University on the Resilient Machines project, which you see in the upper right panels. I've worked with a group in Australia. I know that David Howard is here somewhere on evolving the design of wings for ornithopters. Over the past handful of years, been working on soft robotics, and I'll talk about that a little bit today. And the panels in the bottom center, this highlights the work on the xenobots, so designing the body plans of robots made only from living materials. What I'm going to focus on today actually is not even strictly soft robotics, but metamaterials. I know many of you are interested in materials science, the materials side of soft robotics. I think this is a really exciting avenue of direction for future discovery and future improvement of soft robotics. Is what kinds of materials can we make our robots from? Question number one. Question number two, if we do make our robots from exotic materials like metamaterials, how does that confer adaptation onto the machine? How does that make our robots more adaptive, more safe, more intelligent, more useful, and so on? And I am going to talk a little bit about that today. Despite all these different projects, hopefully you can see visually that they all share one thing in common, is that we're doing optimization in simulation, usually some kind of physics engine, and then trying to transfer some, if not all, of the evolved or the optimized body plan and control policy from simulation to reality. Most of the roboticists here will know about the Sim to Real challenge. It's been a challenge since the beginning of robotics, continues to be a big challenge. I'm not going to talk so much about Sim to Real today, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it if there are any. So what is evolutionary robotics? To think about it, it's useful to borrow an idea from evolutionary biology, which is the idea of morphospace. So in evolutionary biology, morphospace is this almost infinite hypothetical space where every point in this high-dimensional space corresponds to an organism that does exist or has existed, or a species that exists or has existed, or a species that could, in theory, exist but has not yet been discovered by biological evolution. And you can then think of biological evolution as sort of a vector field or a force that is pushing or exploring this space in some way. So taking that idea of morphospace and porting it into robotics, you can sort of tongue-in-cheek refer to this as robospace, the space of all possible robots that could be built given the hardware components that you have available to you. So here's one way of visualizing robospace. It's a cartoon, but you can generally think about at least 3 dimensions that we're interested in with our robots. Competency, so the further to the right a point in this 3-dimensional space is, the better it is at whatever task we want the robot to perform. Generality, the higher the point is, the more things that the machine can do. The third dimension is this concept of embodiment, and I'm not going to try and define it today. Embodiment means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But generally speaking, in AI, we're working with non-embodied systems. And as we move towards the back of this cube, we're dealing with machines that are more embodied, are more intimately interconnected with the physical world. They have more motors, more sensors. They're made of more exotic materials. They're more embodied in some way. If you think about machine learning and deep learning that does not connect with a robot, basically that field is dealing with the front face of this cube. It's exploring the competency and generality, or trying to improve the competency and the generality of the machines, but it's trapped in one part of intelligent machine space, maybe not even robo space if they're not working with robots. If you manually design your machine, you're somewhere in the middle of this cube. If you think about a horizontal cut, you're still exploring. You're still exploring intelligent machines, but you're trapped in a two-dimensional manifold of this space. In evolutionary robotics, or the computational design of robots, we are trying to create optimization methods that can move three-dimensionally through this space, and hopefully find good body plans, good robots, either good rigid robots, soft robots, or biological robots. The next question to think about then is, what does it mean to have a good body? Intuitively speaking, a good body is something that facilitates the training of the control policy for that body, for the robot to do whatever you want it to do. But even that is somewhat vague. What does it mean for a body to facilitate the optimization of control? This is something that through all the work that I've done over the years, is something that I've really tried to focus my thinking on. And at the moment, my answer to the question of what is it that makes a body good for optimizing intelligent behavior for that body is as follows. If you think about a robot or an organism, obviously the world around it is constantly in flux. It's always changing. As we all know, that's what makes robotics challenging and interesting. But up until recently, the inside of the machine, if you look inside the machine, the physical parts themselves are not actually changing. Obviously, the motors are spinning and there might be some mechanical motion inside the machine, but it's usually just sort of a detail of the components that the machine is built from. The machine itself can't rearrange its internal structure. If you think about organisms, every single organism that's ever existed is always internally reorganizing its architecture all the time. In the case of our species, the human species, we develop from a single cell, and during that process, from a single cell to an adult human, we pass through 19 orders of magnitude in scale. That is, if you think about it, it's mind-boggling. Through all of that internal change, all of that internal growth, our bodies and brains together are able to homeostat. They are able to keep us alive, not too hot, not too cold, not too hungry, not too full, and so on. If you think about bodies and brains that are actually focusing their adaptation internally, there's so much work going on internally, interoceptive adaptation, internal adaptation, that when an organism like a human then sits down to learn chess is challenging, or to write poetry or paint or whatever it is that we think is a part of human intelligence, the amount of adaptation that's required to point outwards, to play a good game of chess or write a good poem is nothing compared to homeostating over 19 orders of magnitude. So what makes a good body? A good body is something that can constantly reorganize its internal organization, and that somehow pre-trains the organism or the machine to then handle whatever the external world throws at us. My term for this is morphological pre-training. As our AI and machine learning colleagues are learning, pre-training is a pretty powerful tool. If you can pre-train your machine to adapt to certain circumstances, it's relatively easy to then do a little bit more training, quote unquote, downstream to adapt that machine to whatever it is you want it to do. That idea of pre-training doesn't exist in robotics, at least as far as I can tell. And I think that's one of the futures for soft robotics, because a lot of materials that we build our soft robots from are becoming capable of changing their internal architecture. So that's the idea I want to put forward today, this idea of computationally designing our robots to morphologically pre-train them. In the case of rigid robots, there's, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of internal reorganization that's possible. This was work I did with Hod a number of years ago now. This machine does experience some internal change, but it's unanticipated. We damaged the robot. It's able to adapt its control policy and recover. We took that same idea, and together with Sam Kriegman, my former PhD student, one of the organizers of this workshop, Sam created this simulation here, where now we have a soft robot made up of flexible voxels or 3D pixels. In a moment, Sam is going to go in and cut off 4 of the legs of this soft robot. And at this point, this soft robot has 2 options available to it, which is to adapt its body plan or adapt its control policy to recover. And in this particular case, the robot is adapting its body plan. This particular robot made up of voxels, it's also not able to internally reorganize its morphology to pre-adapt it to unanticipated changes downstream, like damage, but that is something that could become possible. How might you design or computationally design a soft machine that is constantly internally reorganizing itself so that not only is it able to recover from external damage, it might not even notice that external damage has happened. It's just another kind of internal reorganization. It just happens to be an internal reorganization that wasn't under the control of the machine itself. So I've shown you a physically damaged rigid robot, a physically damaged soft robot. Here's a physically damaged biological robot. These are the xenobots. What are you looking at? You're looking at a single xenobot. It's about 1 millimeter across. It's just visible to the naked eye. In this video, obviously, we're looking down through the microscope at about 100 times magnification. You can see this xenobot that's being cut almost in half. You'll see Doug Blackiston, one of our colleagues on this project, reaching in and cutting this robot almost in half, and it immediately, with no additional learning or training, gradually stitches itself back together again. Because this particular machine is made up of cells, and cells have 3.5 billion years experience of constantly changing their neighbors, constantly handling internal reorganization. And there's a lot going on here in the xenobot that we don't yet understand, but presumably a lot of what's going on here is the cells doing what the cells always do. There's been a change in their local neighbors, and somehow, given their billions of years of adaptation, they quote unquote know what to do in this situation with no further pre-training. Okay. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit now. So I talked a little bit about rigid, soft, and biological robots. I want to talk about an ongoing project now with Rebecca Kramer-Botiglio's group here at Yale University. Also Corey O'Hearn, a material science faculty member at Yale, and Mark Shattuck at the City University of New York. Together, we're tackling the computational design of metamaterials. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with metamaterials. They have interesting, non-intuitive bulk properties, and they can be designed to exaggerate those non-intuitive bulk properties. What you're looking at here are 3 different granular metamaterials made up of individual grains, which in this case are just soft plastic pucks. They're being agitated at the left-hand side with an oscillatory signal, and you can see that they have a nonlinear response. Some of these incoming vibrations are being magnified, some are being damped. And so we wanted to see what would happen if you computationally designed this metamaterial. And it turns out that you can not only computationally design these metamaterials, you can design them to do lots of different things. One of the things you can get them to do is to perform computation. So what you're looking at here is obviously a simulation of a metamaterial. This is a metamaterial that's been evolved. An evolutionary algorithm has designed the internal structure of this metamaterial. The dark gray circles that you see, these are these are soft grains, and the light gray circles that you see, these are rigid grains. You'll notice that we are oscillating, we're agitating the green grain and not agitating or not oscillating the blue grain. And we're observing the amplitude of oscillation arriving at the red grain. If you think of the green and blue grains as two inputs and the red as one output, and if you think of vibration as encoding a 1 and lack of vibration as encoding a 0, you can think of this metamaterial as acting like a Boolean logic gate. At this point, we're supplying 1, 0 at the green and blue grain respectively. And you were getting a little bit of vibration, but not very much at the red grain. That's below a certain threshold, so that's being considered an output of 0. It turns out that you can get an evolutionary algorithm to design this metamaterial by making some of these grains rigid or soft, and you can actually evolve them to exhibit or to perform Boolean computation. What you're looking at in the top left here, this is an actual evolved metamaterial that if you supply no vibrations to both inputs, the orange case, or input 0, 0, you get no output, you get no vibration at the red grain. If you supply 0, 1, in the purple case here, you get no vibration. You input 1, 0, you get no vibration at the output. And if you vibrate both of the input particles, you get a vibration at the output red particle. You've got something that acts like an AND gate. So how does this work? As I mentioned, we use an evolutionary algorithm. We create a population of simulated metamaterials. We evaluate each metamaterial in the population 4 times, where we supply these 4 binary cases. And we measure the distance of the output vibration from the desired set of 4 vibrations, which is 0, 0, 0, 1. And we assign a score, which is how much that particular metamaterial acts like an AND gate. And by evolving over time from an initial generation shown in red to a final generation shown in blue, we got the material that I just showed you, this material that's able to act as an AND gate. We took this a little bit further by expanding this evolutionary algorithm into a multi-objective optimization method, meaning we evaluate each metamaterial against 2 objectives. How well it acts as an AND gate at a low frequency, and how well the same material acts as an exclusive OR gate at a higher frequency. And now we get the curve you see in red here, which is the generation 0. We get a whole bunch of metamaterials, 4 metamaterials that don't act like either gates very well. In the case of at the end of the evolutionary run, we get at one end of this Pareto front, or these optimal solutions, we get one that acts very well as an AND gate, but very poorly as an exclusive OR gate. We get another metamaterial in the population that acts very well as an exclusive OR gate at a very high frequency. So over here in the lower right, you can see we supply these 4 binary cases at the high frequency, and indeed it acts like an exclusive OR gate. It only supplies an output when one and only one of the inputs is set to 1, or there's a vibration at only one of the input grains. So we have this material out here that acts as an exclusive OR gate at this high frequency. Most surprising and most interesting to me is this particular metamaterial here, which is able to act not only like an AND gate at a low frequency and also act like an exclusive OR gate at a high frequency, but you can get it to perform both computations and supply the result of both computations at the same place, which is the red grain, at the same time. The different computations are available in that same place at the same time at different points on the frequency spectrum. The way that we do this is, as you can see in the upper right panel, in the left-hand side of that upper right panel, we basically combine these low and high frequency signals. So we're supplying the 4 binary cases at both the low frequency and at the high frequency. Take the Fourier transform of whatever arrives at the output at the red grain in these 4 cases. And you can see indeed that there is high power in the Fourier transform in the second and third case at the high frequency, but not in the first and the fourth case. So it's reliably computing exclusive OR. And the same grain is reporting this, that red grain is also acting as an AND gate at the low frequency. So I think I'm going to end with this example here. This is obviously not a soft robot, it's a metamaterial, but it exhibits, I think, the potential for our field as a whole, which is if we computationally design our machines, we can find bodies or physical structures or materials, like in this case, that not only facilitate adaptive behavior or intelligent behavior, but they embody intelligent behavior in ways that we might not have thought of. There is several thousand years bias in Western thinking, at least. I'm not so sure about Eastern thinking, about the fact that the brain and the body are separate. There's a lot of focus in AI and even robotics on optimizing the brain, but not focusing on the body. Here you have a metamaterial, which is a physical material. There's no neural network here. There's no nervous system that's doing something intelligently in the body, and it's doing something intelligently. It's doing Boolean computations in a way that, at least as far as I know, people haven't really thought of before, which is performing multiple computations and reporting the results in the same place at the same time. So I think as our field moves forward, it's going to challenge us to think about really how it's going to broaden the way we think about realizing adaptive and intelligent behavior in our machines. And I'm out of time, so allow me to just thank the students that did all the actual real work here, thank my sponsors, and if there's any time, I'm happy to take a question or two. Thank you.